I was quite concerned, Mr. Narasta, to hear you talk about over 3,000 Americans that have been murdered in the past decades, and you called that a small and manageable statistic. I would argue that every single one of those lives should never have been killed. And I know that you call yourself, self-described, radical advocate for open borders. That's on your Wikipedia page, but maybe Wikipedia is not always right.
I didn't say it.
However, I would self-describe myself as a radical advocate for safe and secure borders.
Well, I finally found something I agree with my colleague from Georgia. She is certainly radical. I want to focus on the subject of terrorism that is of this hearing. For this fiscal year to date, CBP reports encountering 96 watch-listed individuals between the southern border ports of entry. Let's put that in perspective. That is 0.007% of all Border Patrol encounters in fiscal year 2024. And we know that being on the watch list is not equivalent to being a known terrorist. There are many ways you get on that watch list, and it is certainly not determinative. But there is no question that there is a problem at the border. Our system cannot withstand the number of people who are trying to get into this country. And I would completely agree with you, Mr. Narasta. Part of that is because the quotas for lawful visas have not been increased in 25 to 30 years, even though, of course, our population has dramatically increased, our economy has dramatically grown. We need people to fill jobs in this country up and down the spectrum. I want to also just focus on a couple of things. Mr. Healy, I'll ask you, do you think that it would be helpful to address our problems at the border if the Department of Justice received $440 million to hire additional immigration judge teams?
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful if CBP received $3.8 billion to fund operational costs to manage and enhance security at our nation's borders?
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful if CBP received $723 million to hire additional officers and Border Patrol agents?
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful if DHS received $424 million to combat the entry of fentanyl and other illegal narcotics from entering the United States?
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful if the Immigration and Customs Enforcement received $2.55 billion to fund transportation costs, including increased flights and staging facilities?
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful if ICE received $1.29 billion to fund an expansion of the Alternatives to Detention program, which would allow for immediate enrollment at the southwest border to fulfill non-mandatory detention mandates while keeping track of those who come in?
I'm not sure of that,
Okay.
directive.
What about $4 billion for U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services for personnel, facilities, and related costs to meet new operational requirements, including adding 4,338 asylum officers?
I'm not familiar with that either.
Well, you are aware, of course, that asylum applications take up to 10 years to get through. Is that right?
Yes.
So you don't think that adding more than 4,000 asylum officers would help streamline that process and stop the incentive for people to try to get asylum here?
I'm with CBP. I understand the support they have, but the reality is that if we close the borders, we have even President Biden issued an executive order that stopped the flow.
So all those things I just asked you about were in the bipartisan border security bill that the Senate had agreed to in a bipartisan way, the administration had supported. And do you know who killed that bill?
No, I don't, but the frustration for the
Okay, I'll
folks,
tell you who killed that bill. Donald Trump killed that bill. And he was open about it. And he said he killed it because he didn't want to solve the problems at the border, that all of those things you just agreed would help do so, because he wanted to use it as a political weapon in his campaign. So when we are talking about immigration reform, we can all agree that it cannot only be done by executive order. President Biden had no choice but to implement an executive order that forced people to come through ports of entry if they sought asylum, which has dramatically lowered by more than 50% the border crossings and encounters since he implemented it in June. But that is not a solution. The solution is legislation. And there was legislation that the Republicans killed. So please do not lecture me about all of our problems at the border when it is the Republican Party and Donald Trump who are the ones who refuse to solve the problem. And I yield back.